Hey, what's up guys, TotallyDubbed here, and today I'm doing a video review on the Acer ED273. Now this monitor is a 27-inch curved Full HD monitor, and it has a VA panel to boast. Now in terms of pricing, it can be found for around $200 on Amazon USA and around £180 on Amazon.co.uk. Links will be down in the description in case you're interested. Now in terms of the specs of the monitor, it's got a curved 1800R display. It's also got Full HD, so that's 1920 x 1080p resolution. It's also got a FreeSync, AMD FreeSync built in. Has a quoted 4 milliseconds response time. It has a VA panel, as I previously said, and in terms of inputs, it's got HDMI, DVI and VGA. Oddly enough, there's no DisplayPort inputs. There's also a 3.5mm jack input and output, and finally there's speakers that are also included, which are decent enough for Windows notifications or basic music listening. Now in terms of its competitors, there's actually quite a lot of different monitors. There is the AOC 27-inch, which can be found for £170, which is really aimed at gamers. You've got Iyama's 27-inch as well, which is a kind of a mid-ground between gaming and browsing. Then you've got the Samsung and Dell monitors, which are really aimed at people who are more looking for professional video editing or just watching movies and looking at pictures or browsing Facebook or whatever it might be. I'll link all of these in the description below so that you know of other monitors that are out there in the market which are similar size and or suit different types of people. Now first of all, let's talk about the build quality. Now the build quality of the monitor is actually very nice. It has a nice white silver stand. However, the stand, it only allows tilt adjustment, and in all honesty I felt that the stand is a little bit wobbly when it comes to actually just using it, so if you're going to be keyboard raging or whatnot, you might not notice a little bit of a wobble. Now in terms of the monitor itself, as I said, it's got a curvature, a 1800 curvature. I don't really notice it all that much when you're sitting straight ahead, but if you do pan around left and right, you will notice that there is a little of curvature, therefore adding a little bit extra to immersion, so if you're going to be watching movies or gaming or whatnot, it's always useful. Now in terms of the sides, it's got a 3-side borderless design, which is beautiful, and it's got a silver finish around the side as well, which is kind of different from most monitors which use a normal matte black or glossy black finish, so it's quite nice to see a different looking monitor, and I must say it does look quite nice in comparison to some of the other monitors I've seen. Now around the back of the monitor, on the bottom right hand side, you've got a little joystick, and this is to access the OSD. Now I must say, out of all the OSDs I've gone through, this one is really counterintuitive, and even worse so, it just doesn't really work out very well. Now you can see over here that the contrast is 100 and brightness is 100. It shouldn't be always the case like that. It should be actually a much lower 70 odd or 80 is what I would normally set it at. The reason I'm mentioning about the OSD over here is because it's just a bit counterintuitive. If you press down on the button, it will actually cancel. What you're doing and also switch off the monitor, which I feel is a bit silly to say the least. Now, in terms of its presets, you basically have 3 separate modes: PC, game, and movie. In my opinion, I found that a movie has the best sort of colours and overall look to it. Movie just looked a lot better than the other 3. Other than that, you've got, if I just go in here, it's really counterintuitive, I can't stress that enough. You've got different aspect ratios, DCR as well, Overdrive, which you can enable or disable, and blue light filter as well. Other than that, other than the model number and the OSD setup, and then obviously the contrast and brightness, and you can see when you've got a movie mode, it basically ramps up the contrast to 100. That's pretty much it through the OSD. It's pretty primitive OSD, and the look of it it's not very good in my opinion. Now let's talk about the colours and how the display does. Now first of all, let's talk about colours. Now in all honesty, when I got the monitor out of the box, and even after I just played around with the settings a little bit, I just wasn't that impressed. The colours feel a little bit washed out, it feels that there's something missing, and it just doesn't look that great. It doesn't look that colour accurate. Then when I put it through a color calibrator, because I had one over here, I found that the average delta E is around 2, with the max delta E just sitting under 5. So it's not really the most color accurate monitor out there. It's decent enough in order for color editing and whatnot, but you will see if you do get the monitor and you do compare it to a nice IPS or VA panel out there, some of the monitors that I mentioned in terms of competitors, you'll find that this monitor looks washed out. One other thing that I did notice is that it's quite dull, and at 280 Kelvin it is quite candela, sorry, it is quite dull looking as well. So if you've got a bright sunlit room or you've got a bright room, then you will notice it being not as bright as you might want it to be, no matter how much you ramp up the brightness. And in my example over here, I have brightness set at 100 just because I feel that I need that. I would have liked it to go a little bit brighter, and it would have brought out the colors potentially a little bit more. In terms of its contrast ratio, it's got a sensational 4,100 to 1 contrast ratio. Obviously that is contrast set to 100 in movie mode, and that's what it gets. It's absolutely sensational in terms of its contrast, and it can be seen when you're looking at images. The contrast between the road over here and the trees, or the sky at the background and the mountain, really comes out fantastically. It's really up there with some of the best monitors in terms of raw contrast ratio. But that doesn't really paint the whole picture. Unfortunately, contrast ratio is only something that can be defined between blacks and whites. Other than that, in terms of how the colors respond to it as well, is a completely different aspect. So as I said, due to its washed out nature, the contrast ratio is kind of lost. I would have just liked a little bit more accurate colors. Flicking through images over here, especially this image over here, you just expect the blues to be just a little bit sharper, the pinks to be also a little bit sharper over here. It's very slight, and you might not notice it when you get out of the box, or if you have no reference monitor to look at. But given the fact that I've looked at over 100 different monitors, I can definitely tell you it has a slight washed out look to it. So overall, colors aren't great, contrast ratio is fantastic, and brightness is decent. Finally, I want to talk about the brightness uniformity, which actually is relatively good. Top right hand side on my monitor has got minus 10.2, but given the fact it's a normal consumer grade monitor, it's absolutely acceptable, and it had no sort of perceivable problems with the display uniformity, so top marks there from Acer. Finally, let's talk about gaming. Now, it is a 60 Hz panel out the box. However, I could factory overclock it, as in just overclock it through the NVIDIA control panel, and have it successfully running at 75 Hz. Now, at 75 Hz, obviously, you do get the extra, the benefit of the refresh rate, and therefore less tearing. Now, in terms of overdrive, I did notice there is slight ghosting that occurs. It will be even more apparent if you play games like Fortnite or Overwatch. But in a game like Counter-Strike, I would leave overdrive at the on position. When you turn off overdrive, the response time on the monitor slows down even more. And I must say, in terms of the overall response time, the response time isn't great. It's average. I would be happy in terms of casual gaming. In terms of competitive gaming, it could be seen as like a lower rank competitive gaming, but if you start gaming at more of a higher level, then I think you'll find that this monitor is a bit too slow to respond. So overall, decent for casual gaming. I wouldn't pick it over some of the other monitors I recommended in terms of competitive gaming, or just more if you're more serious about gaming. It's not really aimed at gamers anyway, but nevertheless it's always worth pointing out. I must say I was very impressed with its input lag, at least its perceived input lag. It feels very low, and Acer are relatively known for creating monitors with low input lag, and this monitor seemed at least to have a low input. It's just its response time that let it down. So overall, what do I think about the monitor? Well, around 180 to 190 pounds, I just think the monitors that I mentioned at the beginning of the video just do a lot better job. Overall, like let's say the AOC, that monitor is a lot better for gamers, although its colors and contrast ratio will not match this Acer monitor. The Arma is a good all-rounder, so it will provide better color accuracy, but won't have that curvature. Finally, the Samsung, it's a curved monitor. It basically does everything that this Acer monitor does, just looks a bit different and has a different stand. Other than that, I would choose that Samsung monitor. I'm not sure if that can be overclocked or not, or if it has AMD FreeSync support like this Acer monitor. On top of my head, I don't think it does, but no, it actually does. Never mind, ignore what I just said. So it does have FreeSync support. So in all honesty, if you're a gamer and you're looking for a decent monitor, I'd pick the Samsung, even though it's just £10 more. It'll be definitely worth it. And if you're someone who's just looking for color editing or video editing, then this Dell monitor runs at 75Hz, has AMD FreeSync, and yes, it's not the fastest monitor in the world because it's IPS 6 milliseconds response time, but overall it'll be a much better pick. So obviously if you're not interested in gaming, you can save yourself a little bit of money and get a £150, very nice £150 IPS monitor. So those are my recommendations, and unfortunately I can't see myself recommending this Acer monitor. It's a nice monitor, don't get me wrong, but in terms of its color accuracy, I just feel that it's let down severely. Its OSD is actually primitive as well. In terms of gaming performance, its response time isn't the best out there. So there we go, guys. I've been totally dubbed. If you've enjoyed this review, make sure you give it a like, subscribe, comment, let me know in the comments below what you think of the monitor, and favourite and share, as it always helps the channel grow. Alright guys, totally dubbed out. Bye bye.